a millionaire sees a homeless woman and her child in the rain and gave her his credit card. A few days later, he went to the police and reported that the night was intensely dark and the relentless rain drummed a somber rhythm on the roof of Dennis's car. He was driving his sleek black BMW, headlights casting rippling reflections on the puddle-strewn streets. The wipers beat steadily, clearing his view, but his mind drifted, tangled up in thoughts of an upcoming, critical presentation. This wasn't just another task on his calendar. It was the kind of meeting that could shape the future of his international business. As his headlights cut through the shadows, he mentally rehearsed each line of his pitch, imagining his partner's reactions. But when he stopped at a red light, something by the side of the road pulled his attention away from his carefully ordered thoughts. Under a dim streetlight, a hunched figure stirred a deep sense of empathy in him. A young woman, holding a baby wrapped in a worn-out blanket, sat there, trying to shield the child from the relentless rain. The sight was gut-wrenching, and a small voice urged him, "Help them, don't just pass by." Dennis shook his head, pushing back against the thought. "It's pouring rain, and I don't have the time right now," he reasoned with himself. His hand on the steering wheel shook slightly. Someone else will help. They must. The light changed to green, and he drove on, trying to distance himself from the scene. But his conscience wasn't so easily dismissed. The image of the woman and her baby lingered in his rearview mirror, reminding him of his own vulnerabilities and compassion. Then, he noticed a dark figure emerge from the shadows. A tall man, hood pulled up, was approaching the woman in an intimidating manner. She tried to move, but stumbled, clutching her baby as she fell, her cry barely audible over the rain. Dennis couldn't ignore it any longer. He slammed on the brakes, parked with a jolt, and jumped out, unfazed by the rain soaking him. The man, realizing he'd been seen, turned and melted back into the night, just as quickly as he had appeared. When Dennis approached the woman, he noticed her blue eyes were filled with fear and hesitation. "Are you okay?" he asked, reaching out a hand with careful gentleness. She looked up in shock at the unexpected kindness of a stranger. I think so," she answered uncertainly, her voice trembling as much as her drenched shoulders. His eyes drifted to her knee, which was visibly injured and twisted in a painful way. "Your knee doesn't look too good," he observed with concern. She sighed, a mixture of pain and weariness in her expression. "I hurt it earlier today." "Someone chased me almost 2 blocks, she admitted. "I fell trying to get away." Dennis's concern deepened. "Do you know him?" he asked, his tone serious. She shook her head, instinctively holding her baby even closer. "No, I've never seen him before. I don't know what he wanted from me. From us." Dennis felt his heart tighten at her words. He scanned the area, making sure the man was nowhere nearby, then quickly decided on what to do. "We should get you to a hospital. It's not safe here." Gently, he helped her to her feet and supported her as they moved toward his car. Once they were seated inside, with her and the baby in the passenger seat, the rain began to ease up, as if even the sky took a breath. Dennis sensed his evening was about to take a very different turn than he had planned, but somehow he felt he was exactly where he needed to be. As they headed toward the hospital, the woman introduced herself. "My name's Joyce White," she said, her voice still unsteady. "And this is Evelyn, my daughter." Dennis nodded, indicating he'd heard her, though his focus remained on the road ahead. Whatever meeting he'd scheduled would have to wait. Driving through streets that were finally calm after the rain, Dennis kept his attention forward, though he couldn't help glancing over at Joyce and her daughter. Joyce cradled Evelyn close, the little girl's head tucked beneath a blanket to shield her from the cold. Breaking the silence, Dennis asked, "How did you end up out here like this?" Joyce looked out the fogged window, and let out a heavy sigh. "My life hasn't been simple," she began, her voice soft and uneven. "I grew up in a home filled with anger. My mother passed when I was 10, and my father, he never recovered from it. He took all his pain out on me. When Evelyn came into this world, I knew I had to get away. I couldn't bear the thought of her growing up in that place." Dennis felt a tug at his heart as he listened to Joyce speak, recognizing the courage of a woman who, despite everything, fought for a brighter future for her child. "You're incredibly brave," he told her, genuinely admiring her strength. Joyce gave him a faint smile, nodding in appreciation. "I just want Evelyn to have a real shot at happiness, something I barely knew myself." As they arrived at the hospital, Dennis carefully helped Joyce out of the car, cradling Evelyn while Joyce balanced herself on her injured knee. Together, they made their way to the emergency room, where he explained the situation to the receptionist. She immediately summoned a nurse. While Joyce received attention, Dennis took care of the paperwork, making sure the staff knew to use his credit card for all costs. "Please make sure they have everything they need," he said, his voice steady and serious. The nurse, a kind-looking woman around middle age, nodded, clearly moved by his concern. "Don't worry, sir. We'll look after them." Dennis turned to Joyce, who was now seated in a wheelchair with a peacefully sleeping Evelyn resting in her arms. "I have to go now, but I'll be back soon," he promised, feeling a surprising reluctance to leave. "Thank you for everything, Dennis. I can't imagine what I'd have done without you today," Joyce replied, gratitude shining in her blue eyes. He smiled back, a simple nod masking the depth of what he felt. "Take care. I'll see you soon," he reassured her, taking one last look at Evelyn before heading back to his car. On the drive back to his life of deadlines and meetings, Dennis found himself lost in thought, replaying the unexpected events of the day. The image of Joyce and Evelyn lingered in his mind, a striking reminder of life beyond his usual focus. As he pulled into the parking lot of the high-rise where his next meeting was waiting, his phone buzzed with an urgent call from his assistant, Amanda. Her voice was quick and slightly worried. "Sir, everyone is here for the meeting. You're the last one we're waiting on." "I'm getting in the elevator now," Dennis replied, hanging up. He took a steadying breath, bracing himself for the switch from one world to another, though he knew something inside him had shifted that rainy night. As the elevator climbed, Amanda's hurried words echoed faintly in his mind. He straightened his tie, a nervous habit that was more for comfort than anything, as he tried to push the persistent images of Joyce and Evelyn out of his mind, knowing they'd left a lasting mark. "Stay focused, Dennis. Business first," he muttered to himself, pulling together the composure and clarity his role demanded. The elevator chimed, announcing his arrival on the right floor, and as he exited, his expression became more resolute. Amanda stood waiting, visibly relieved to see him. "Sir, everyone's been waiting. They've already asked about you twice," she said, her tone a mix of concern and reassurance. "Got it, Amanda. Let's do this," he replied with a firm nod. Together, they walked down the sleek corridor toward the conference room, where partners and investors were shifting impatiently. As Dennis entered, all eyes locked onto him, filled with a blend of expectancy and mild frustration. "Dennis, where have you been? We're running behind," one of the partners, a stern-faced man in his 50s, stated. "Apologies for the delay. An unexpected issue came up," Dennis answered, keeping his tone steady. "But I'm here now, and we're ready to get started. Let's focus on what really matters." Without further discussion, he moved to the head of the table, opened his laptop, and launched into his presentation. The projected slides showcased detailed graphs and future projections, each one thoughtfully designed to persuade. While presenting, fleeting thoughts of Joyce and Evelyn surfaced, but he channeled them to drive his performance forward. The room, initially tense due to his late arrival, began to relax. Faces around the table softened, replaced by nods and murmurs of agreement. Dennis expertly fielded tough questions and addressed complex scenarios, handling each one like the seasoned professional he was. As time passed, the tense energy evolved into a shared sense of achievement. After the final slide and last question, the room fell silent in acknowledgement. Amanda was the first to speak, her face bright with pride. "Congratulations, sir. That was impressive, especially considering the late start." Dennis allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction as he closed his laptop. "Thank you all for your patience and commitment. Thank you for your confidence. I promise the outcome will speak louder than words." The partners rose, exchanging handshakes and friendly backpats, each echoing Amanda's words of reassurance. As everyone began to leave, Dennis lingered for a moment, his mind drifting to the woman and child in the hospital. "Amanda, could you handle things here? I need to check on something before I call it a day," he said, already making his way to the door. "Absolutely, sir. Everything's under control," she replied as he hurried off. As Dennis stepped into the parking lot, he realized he couldn't just fall back into his regular routine. That rainy night had left him with a feeling he couldn't shake. He needed to check on Joyce and Evelyn to make sure they were truly safe and looked after. Driving back to the hospital, his phone buzzed several times, but he ignored it, fully focused on this new priority. As twilight settled over the city, Dennis gathered his partners and Amanda in the office, explaining the unexpected events that had kept him away earlier. They sat around the large mahogany table, the tension from before still thick in the air. "I know my delay raised some concerns," Dennis began, his tone steady and serious. He explained his encounter with Joyce and Evelyn, the urgency to get them to the hospital, and how the experience had shifted his view on what truly mattered. William, a senior partner, folded his arms, his expression hard with disapproval. "Today, you risked the company's reputation by acting impulsively for people you barely know. That was reckless, Dennis." Keeping his calm, Dennis met William's eyes with a steady gaze. "I understand your concern, William, but I don't regret what I did. Sometimes, we have to remember that we're people first, before we're business professionals." Amanda, ever the diplomat, stepped in gently. "Maybe there's something to be learned here, William. Sometimes generosity itself is a form of leadership." Some partners murmured their agreement, while others looked unconvinced. In the end, the group agreed to let the matter rest, choosing to focus on keeping the business moving forward. "Have a good weekend, everyone. See you Monday," Dennis finished, ending the meeting with a friendly but firm tone. The following morning, under the gentle glow of dawn, Dennis made his way back to the hospital, his mind racing with hope, mixed with apprehension about Joyce and Evelyn's well-being. Stepping up to the reception desk, he was met with a courteous smile from the receptionist, who quickly began searching through the system for information. "Sir, it looks like Joyce White and the baby were discharged at the end of the night shift," she informed him, her tone steady and professional. Dennis felt a sudden chill run through him as the news hit, dashing his expectations. "Did they leave any contact details? Any address where they might have gone?" he asked, struggling to keep the urgency out of his voice. The receptionist double-checked the system, her fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. "I'm afraid there's nothing here beyond the initial care records," she replied. Offering her a quick nod of thanks, Dennis turned from the desk, his mind churning with unanswered questions. He walked back to his car, each step weighed down by an intensifying sense of worry and frustration. Driving back home, the gravity of the situation began to set in. Without any leads on Joyce and Evelyn's whereabouts, Dennis found himself staring down a weekend filled with doubt. The moment he entered his house, he hurried to his office, digging through his bag to find his phone, hoping for any missed call or message that might provide a clue. Yet, as he tried to turn it on, he realized it was completely dead. With a frustrated sigh, he plugged it into the charger, his thoughts wandering, consumed with what to do next. That evening, as he sat down to a solitary dinner, the uncertainty gnawed at him, hinting at a long and difficult weekend ahead, filled with questions about Joyce and Evelyn's sudden departure. Early Saturday morning, with the first rays of light barely touching the sky, Dennis plugged his phone back into the charger. While he waited for it to charge, his mind swirled with thoughts of Joyce and Evelyn. The moment the phone powered on, a flood of notifications appeared, all showing transactions on the credit card he had left with Joyce at the hospital. Scanning through the purchases, he saw listings for expensive electronics, a massive TV, and even a gaming console. His jaw clenched in frustration and disappointment. How could she? He muttered to himself, feeling a wave of anger mixed with a deep sense of betrayal. Intent on getting to the bottom of things, Dennis threw on his jacket and made his way to the electronics store where the items had been bought. The place was buzzing with customers checking out the latest gadgets. Dennis headed straight for customer service, where a young employee welcomed him with a courteous smile. "Good morning. I need assistance regarding some suspicious transactions made here yesterday," Dennis said, showing the notifications on his phone. The employee, slightly taken aback, immediately called for the manager. "Let's look into this for you, sir," said the manager, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s. "Can you describe who might have made these purchases?" Dennis described Joyce and then mentioned the mysterious man he'd seen her with on that rainy evening. The manager agreed to check the security footage, leading him to the back room where the monitors were located. As the footage from the previous night played on the screen, Dennis's focus intensified, expecting to see Joyce at the checkout. But to his growing dismay, it wasn't Joyce in the video. It was the man he had seen approach her. The man wandered the aisles, selecting high-ticket items with a casual ease that grated on Dennis's nerves. "That's him," Dennis pointed, a flash of anger in his eyes. "But where's Joyce? Were they together? Was this some kind of setup?" The manager froze the screen, giving a clear view of the man's face. "We don't recognize him as a regular here," she said, "and we didn't see the woman you described." Feeling both frustrated and perplexed, Dennis thanked the manager and left. The idea that he might have been scammed, that Joyce could be involved, gnawed at him, but a part of him was unwilling to believe it was all a trick. Resolved to get answers, Dennis decided his next move would be to track down the man from the footage. With a copy of the video and the man's face clear in his mind, he got in his car and drove to the nearest police station to file a report and ask for their assistance. Determination and frustration mingling inside him, Dennis walked into the busy police station. The lobby buzzed with activity. He approached the reception desk, where an officer looked at him with a professional but cautious expression. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked, noting the tension in Dennis's face. "Yes, I need to report a case of fraud and possible manipulation," Dennis stated, handing the officer a copy of the surveillance footage. "I believe this man is involved, and he might be aiming to harm an innocent woman." The officer scanned the footage briefly and summoned a detective. Dennis recounted the entire ordeal, from meeting Joyce and Evelyn to uncovering the unauthorized purchases. The detective, a middle-aged man with a sharp gaze, listened intently and promised to assist. "Let's see what we can do to track him down." "You have his address, right?" the detective inquired. With the electronic store's help, Dennis had obtained the suspect's address, which was linked to the delivery of the items. Armed with this lead, Dennis, the detective, and a team of officers made their way to the address, located in a rundown neighborhood on the city's outskirts. Arriving at the area, the detective organized a careful approach. The narrow streets and neglected homes conveyed a sense of hardship. Dennis's nerves heightened with each step. As they rounded a corner, Dennis suddenly spotted the man from the footage. "There he is," he called out, pointing. The suspect noticed the officers and bolted, prompting a chase through the maze-like alleys. After a tense pursuit, they caught up to him, restraining him as he resisted arrest. Back at the station, the man, identified as Walter, was placed in an interrogation room. Dennis watched from behind a one-way mirror as the detective began questioning. "Why were you using someone else's credit card to make such large purchases?" The detective asked calmly but firmly. Walter looked down, his hands shaking slightly. "It was Joyce. She gave me the card and told me I could use it to buy some things," he claimed, his voice wavering. Listening through the glass, Dennis felt a mix of frustration and disbelief, exchanging doubtful glances with the officers nearby. "He's lying," Dennis murmured, though a sliver of doubt crept in, unsettling him. "Let's verify his story," the detective said, stepping out to continue the investigation. Meanwhile, Dennis sat in the station's waiting area, thoughts racing as he tried to piece together the truth. Everything felt like it was getting more tangled, and Dennis knew he'd have to stay calm if he wanted to get to the bottom of things. After the intense interrogation, he felt lost and helpless. He decided to let the authorities and his lawyer, Paul, a highly skilled professional, take control of the situation. Over the next few days, he threw himself back into work, trying to push aside thoughts of Joyce, Evelyn, and the enigmatic Walter. But the uncertainty lingered, casting a dark shadow over his life. 2 weeks of restless nights and grueling days had passed when, on a quiet afternoon, his phone buzzed with a call from an unrecognized number. Dennis was deep in a meeting and dismissed the call, assuming it was a sales pitch or some kind of spam. When it rang again, he silenced it without even glancing. But on the third ring, curiosity, mixed with an odd sense of urgency, prompted him to answer. "Hello," he said, his voice carrying a hint of frustration at the interruption. There was a pause, and then a woman's voice, shaky and anxious, spoke quickly. "I'm sorry. I was forced to do this," she said, and before he could reply, the line went dead, leaving a strange silence. Dennis froze, still holding the phone to his ear, trying to make sense of the words. "Forced to do what?" he muttered, confused. The voice seemed faintly familiar, but the briefness of the call left him questioning himself. Back at the table, he stared at his phone, hoping the caller would try again, but there was only silence. "Is this another trick?" he wondered, now suspicious of everything. Acting on impulse, he left the meeting room and headed straight to Paul's office. "Paul, I got a weird call," he said. "A woman told me she was forced to do this, and then hung up. I need to know if it was Joyce. Can you trace the number?" Paul, always focused and methodical, nodded, already tapping on his laptop. "Let's see what we can uncover, Dennis. This could either be a major lead or just another layer of confusion." As Paul worked, Dennis sat, his mind racing. The mystery behind the call gnawed at him. If it was Joyce, why would she reach out now? And what had she been forced into? The idea that she could be in danger started to grow, filling him with a new urgency. Paul finally raised his head, his face set in a serious expression. "The call came from a public phone, which complicates things a bit," he explained. "But it's located near where you mentioned first running into Joyce." Hearing this, Dennis felt a surge of purpose. "Then let's go," he replied, grabbing his car keys. "If there's even a chance this could lead us to Joyce and clear up this whole mess, I need to see it for myself." They left the office, the sky darkening overhead as they drove toward the phone booth's location. Both men were lost in thought, wondering what they'd uncover. Dennis and Paul arrived at a dimly lit street corner where the booth stood, a relic from another era that seemed out of place in the modern cityscape. "I'll try calling the number back," Dennis said, taking out his cell phone. His fingers hovered over the keys before he finally dialed the number he'd saved. As the line connected, he felt a strange mix of hope and unease. Then someone picked up. "Hello, Joyce? If that's really your name," he said, suspicion coloring his voice. There was a brief silence on the other end, then a tearful voice answered, full of distress. "Yes, it's me, Dennis. I'm so sorry for all of this. I was forced to give the card to Walter. He's a loan shark. He threatened me and my daughter. I tried to run, but he caught up with us." Dennis's heart pounded as his worst fears were confirmed. "Joyce, where are you now? I need details. How did he find you, and what exactly did he threaten you with?" She sniffled before replying, her voice still trembling. "I'm in hiding now. He tracked me down the day after I left the hospital. Walter knew my usual spots. He said if I didn't hand over the card, something bad would happen to Evelyn." Joyce's agony was almost tangible, even through the phone. "Please, Dennis, you have to believe me. I'll send you my location. Come see my documents. They'll prove everything." Dennis quickly jotted down the address Joyce shared. "I'm on my way. Stay put, and don't tell anyone else about this," he instructed, as Paul, standing beside him, listened carefully. After hanging up, Dennis turned to Paul. "She's in trouble, Paul. We have to help her." Paul nodded, his face serious. "I'll reach out to the police to make sure we have backup. We don't know exactly what we're walking into." They headed to the car together and set off for the address Joyce had given. The car ride was quiet, both men absorbed in their own thoughts, considering what they might uncover. When they arrived, they found a rundown building in a neglected part of town. A knot tightened in Dennis's stomach. "I hope we're not too late," he muttered, as they climbed the stairs to the apartment Joyce had mentioned. Dennis knocked on the door, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. After a tense moment, the door creaked open, and there was Joyce, shaken but unharmed. She quickly let them in, casting a wary glance down the hall before closing the door. Inside, Dennis noticed papers scattered on a small dining table, a glimpse into Joyce's life that might hold some much-needed answers. But before they could dive into any discussion, Dennis's phone rang, breaking the tense silence. It was his lawyer, with urgent news about Walter. Over the next few days, Dennis and Paul worked tirelessly, piecing together each detail connected to Joyce's life. The pressure of the situation kept them going as they waited for more information from Dennis's lawyer. Finally, on a hot, humid afternoon, Dennis's phone rang. It was his lawyer, Tyler, whose voice carried a mix of relief and concern. "Dennis, I have some good news and some significant confirmations," Tyler began. "We've verified Joyce's identity through several documents and records. She's who she says she is, Joyce White, daughter of Edward White, and her father has a troubling record with multiple assault complaints against him." Dennis felt a blend of relief and worry hearing this. "This explains a lot, Tyler, but it also makes me more concerned for her safety and for little Evelyn's. We have to act quickly." "Absolutely," Tyler replied. "I'll keep investigating and update you on any progress." After ending the call, Dennis picked up his phone, feeling a surge of resolve. He dialed Joyce's number, eager to share the latest information and plan their next steps to ensure her safety. The phone rang a few times before Joyce answered, her voice sounding hesitant and a bit shaky. "Joyce, it's me. My lawyer has found something significant, and we need to go over it. Are you in a safe place right now?" Dennis's voice was thick with worry. Before Joyce could answer, a loud crash cut into the conversation. Dennis could hear the thud of something heavy slamming against what he guessed was a door. "Joyce, what's happening over there?" he shouted, his heart pounding with anxiety. Another loud bang and muffled screams interrupted her as she started to say, "Dennis, I—" The phone slipped from her grasp, and Dennis listened helplessly to the sounds of chaos. Thuds, shouts, and frantic movements filling the air. "Joyce!" Dennis shouted into the phone, unable to do anything but listen. The noise of a door breaking down and more terrified screams filled his ears, heightening his panic. With no other options, Dennis bolted to his car, phone still glued to his ear, trying to make sense of the violence unfolding. As he raced toward Joyce's apartment, he fought to keep calm, but fear and concern flooded his mind. Nearing her building, he could already hear the wail of sirens approaching. Though the call was still connected, he could only hear fragments, scattered sounds and occasional faint words from Joyce. Dennis parked hastily and sprinted toward the building, praying she was safe, but fearing the worst. He rushed down the hallway, listening to the chaotic sounds over the phone, growing more desperate with each step. "Is Walter behind this?" he shouted to his lawyer, who was still on the line, urgently coordinating with the police. "He escaped custody just days ago," the lawyer replied, his tone grim, recognizing the severity of the situation. "Dennis, I'm sorry. I didn't think it was worth mentioning. We didn't expect he'd do something so extreme. This is serious, Tyler. We need the police here now." Dennis bound up the stairs 2 at a time, calling back over his shoulder, "I'm going to her apartment. Do whatever you can to get help here fast." As he reached Joyce's floor, his heart pounded in his chest with urgency. The hall was strangely quiet, yet the muffled sounds of a struggle still echoed through his phone, sharpening his focus. The door to her apartment was slightly open, its frame visibly splintered, a clear sign of forced entry. "Joyce," he called, pushing the door open wider and stepping inside. The place was a mess, with overturned furniture and personal items scattered everywhere. From the far end of the hallway, the noise of a struggle came from the bedroom. Determined, Dennis moved quickly, his pulse thundering in his ears. As he neared the bedroom, the sounds of fighting grew louder. He swung the door open to find Joyce struggling against a man he instantly recognized, Walter. "Let her go!" Dennis shouted, charging forward to intervene. Caught off guard, Walter released Joyce, turning with a snarl. "You shouldn't be here," Walter growled, positioning himself defensively. Joyce, visibly shaken and tearful, backed into a corner, eyes wide with fear. Adrenaline-fueled, Dennis advanced on Walter without waiting a second. The two men clashed in a fierce, tense struggle that sent more furniture crashing around them. At one point, Dennis managed to land a solid hit, sending Walter reeling back against the wall. "Dennis, I'm okay," Joyce whispered, her voice shaky. The lawyer had finally alerted the police, and they were on their way when sirens wailed in the distance. Dennis kept a firm hold on Walter, waiting for law enforcement to arrive. Relief that he'd made it in time mingled with anger at the danger Joyce and Evelyn had endured. He knew that in the next few hours, it would be essential to make sure Walter couldn't harm them again. "It's okay now, Joyce." "It's okay," Dennis reassured, his words as much for himself as for her, while the police stormed into the apartment, taking over the situation. Dennis barely gave the speed limits a second thought as he raced across town in an effort to reach Joyce before anything worse could happen. The moment he arrived, he parked with a screech and dashed out, leaving the car unlocked in his haste. Adrenaline surged as he pushed through the lobby, opting to take the stairs 2 at a time rather than wait for the elevator. Joyce's terrified voice echoed in his mind with each step, guiding him down the hallway toward her apartment. Noticing her door slightly open, Dennis didn't hesitate. He entered, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, the sounds of a struggle led him straight to Joyce's bedroom. There, he found Walter trying to force his way into the room where Joyce had barricaded herself. Without a moment's thought, Dennis yelled, "Walter, step away from her now!" Walter spun around, startled, with a furious glare. "This is none of your business, Dennis," he snarled, advancing toward him with menacing resolve. While not a trained fighter, Dennis had some self-defense skills and braced himself, ready to put them to use. Dennis sized up Walter's approach, and as he lunged, sidestepped and used Walter's momentum against him, twisting him into a painful arm lock that brought him down hard. "She will never be yours, Walter. This stops now," Dennis declared, holding Walter securely on the ground. Just then, police officers, alerted by Paul, burst into the apartment, quickly taking in the situation. They handcuffed Walter, who continued to resist even as they restrained him. With Walter finally in custody, Dennis turned to the bedroom door. "Joyce, it's me, Dennis. You're safe now. You can open the door." There was a pause, and then the sound of the lock turning followed. The door opened slowly, revealing Joyce, her face tear-streaked and eyes red with fear. Seeing Dennis, she ran to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. "Dennis, I don't know what I would have done without you. Thank you for not giving up on me," she whispered, clinging to him as if she never wanted to let go. Dennis held her close, whispering, "You'll never go through this alone again, Joyce. We'll make sure he can never hurt you again." He felt a powerful blend of relief and anger as he thought about the nightmare she had endured. As the police took statements and processed the scene, Dennis remained by Joyce's side, making sure she felt safe and protected. Yet he knew that despite the initial relief, the road ahead wouldn't be easy. They would have to confront the legal and emotional fallout from everything that had happened. In the days after the encounter with Walter, Joyce's life began to shift under Dennis's protective presence. Though the trauma of the event lingered like a shadow, Dennis's unwavering support provided her a steady anchor. He spent nearly every day at her apartment, helping her not only repair the physical damage, but also rebuild the confidence she needed to move forward. He hired painters and carpenters, turning the once dim space into a bright and inviting home. "How are you feeling today, Joyce?" Dennis would ask during his daily visits, while Evelyn played with her new toys on the living room floor. "A little better, Dennis," Joyce would reply, a hint of a smile on her face. "Seeing the apartment transform gives me hope that things can actually improve." Dennis smiled back warmly, his gaze filled with understanding. Over the weeks, Dennis and Joyce started going out together, choosing open, peaceful places like parks and gardens where Evelyn could run and play while they talked, purposefully avoiding the recent trauma. During these moments, Dennis realized just how much his admiration for Joyce had deepened into something more. "Joyce, you're amazing, not only for surviving everything you went through, but for how you're rebuilding your life," he told her one afternoon as they watched Evelyn chase butterflies. His words touched Joyce, who was a little shy and looked down. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Dennis. You've been there just when I needed it most." Even as their bond grew and a quiet romance blossomed. Dennis understood Joyce's recovery was still ongoing. They had legal battles to tackle with the case against Walter, as well as her regular therapy sessions to help her heal. "Every day is one step closer to peace, Joyce, and I'll be here with you every step of the way," he promised, holding her hand as they strolled home after a day outdoors. Though they embraced these new beginnings and cherished their time together, the looming legal and emotional challenges occasionally clouded their happiness. As they prepared to step into the next phase of their lives, Dennis knew they still had a long journey ahead, one they would face together. On a peaceful afternoon, Evelyn was finally resting after hours of playing, and Dennis and Joyce sat together on the couch, both enjoying a quiet, shared moment. The ringing of Dennis's phone abruptly broke the enveloping silence that had been surrounding them like a comforting blanket. As he glanced at the screen, He saw it was his lawyer, a call he had been expecting yet dreading. The news about Walter's case was something both he and Joyce knew they'd have to confront, but they couldn't help feeling uneasy about it. In the days that followed, Dennis and Joyce put their energy into creating a new beginning for her and Evelyn, striving to move past the painful shadows of her trauma. Dennis used his network of contacts and resources to find a new home for them, a secure, tranquil apartment far from the memories that haunted Joyce. This move was not merely about finding a new space to live. It symbolized a fresh start, a new chapter with a sense of safety and renewed hope. "Look, Joyce," Dennis said as he guided her through the apartment. "This place has round-the-clock security and a beautiful park right outside. Evelyn's going to have so much space to run around and play." The apartment felt bright and welcoming. Sunlight streamed through the windows, filling the freshly painted rooms with warmth. The space seemed to carry a promise of brighter days ahead, and Dennis could see a hint of relief and hope in Joyce's expression. Joyce held Evelyn's tiny hand, her gaze traveling across the spacious rooms as she let herself imagine a life where fear didn't linger in every corner. "This is perfect, Dennis. I honestly don't know how to thank you for all that you're doing for us," she said softly, her voice filled with sincere gratitude. Dennis shook his head gently, a warm smile crossing his face. "You don't need to thank me, Joyce. Seeing both of you safe and happy, that's all I need," he replied, truly content to be able to help. Yet, even as they settled into this new place with hopes of a fresh start, the fear of Walter and his connections still hung over them like a dark cloud. One quiet afternoon, as Dennis and Joyce organized some of her belongings in the new apartment, Dennis's phone rang again. The moment he saw his lawyer's name on the screen, his heart skipped a beat. Answering quickly, he heard the lawyer's tense voice on the other end. "Dennis, we have a problem." The lawyer's tone made Dennis's heart sink. It appears Walter wasn't acting alone. He has allies, and they're not happy about his arrest. Our information suggests they might try to retaliate against Joyce, possibly as a form of intimidation before the trial. A cold dread washed over Dennis as he listened. He looked over at Joyce, who was playing with Evelyn, blissfully unaware of the new threat. "What do we do? We can't leave them exposed like this," he said, his voice thick with worry. "I'm coordinating with the police to arrange additional security around Joyce and Evelyn," the lawyer assured him. The lawyer advised, "Perhaps it's wise to think about extra protection for them. Bringing in private security might be a smart move until we can get this settled." Dennis didn't hesitate, fully committed to keeping Joyce and Evelyn safe. "Make those arrangements and keep me updated on anything new," he instructed before ending the call. With a serious look, he approached Joyce. "Joyce, we need to talk. There's a new situation that's come up," he began, bracing himself to explain the latest threat on the horizon. That afternoon, they strategized, determined to keep their peaceful lives from being disrupted once again. The discussion was intense but essential, full of assurances and safety measures, as they planned to protect their small but cherished family. As the sun began to set, casting a quiet calm over the day, Dennis felt both resolved and uneasy. Yet he was unwavering in his promise to keep Joyce and Evelyn safe and happy. The looming threat of Walter and his associates would not cast a shadow on the future they were working so hard to rebuild. With Dennis's steady support, Joyce and Evelyn's lives slowly started to regain stability. He not only secured a safe place for them to live, but also helped Joyce find meaningful work that matched her skills and gave her a renewed sense of purpose. Dennis used his network to find the right opportunities for her, ensuring she could work somewhere safe and supportive. Over dinner in their new home, Dennis asked, "How was the interview, Joyce?" Evelyn was happily playing on the floor nearby, arranging colorful blocks with a big grin. "It went really well, Dennis," Joyce replied, her eyes bright with gratitude and hope. My background impressed the manager, and the workplace is very welcoming. I think I'll be happy there, she added, her voice filled with excitement. Dennis nodded, smiling. I knew they'd see your potential. You have so much to bring to the table, Joyce. I'm really happy for you. As days went by, Dennis and Joyce spent more time together, not only sharing responsibilities with Evelyn, but also exploring new pastimes. Whether it was visiting a local exhibit, catching a movie, or strolling through the neighborhood park, each moment strengthened their connection. One afternoon, as they watched Evelyn playing joyfully at the park, Dennis gently reached for Joyce's hand. The lawyer suggested, it may be wise to consider additional protective measures for them. Hiring private security might be a prudent step until we can get this situation under control. Dennis, without hesitation, agreed and resolved to do whatever it took to keep Joyce and Evelyn safe. Please make the arrangements and keep me updated on any changes, he replied, before ending the call. He walked over to Joyce, his face marked with a seriousness that caught her attention. Joyce, we need to talk. There's something new we need to discuss, he began, choosing his words carefully as he prepared to explain the fresh danger they were facing. They spent the rest of the afternoon together, outlining the precautions they'd need to take and focusing on preserving the calm they had worked so hard to build. It was a difficult conversation, full of concern and resolve, as they made promises to stay vigilant and protect their little family. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the room, Dennis felt a powerful mix of determination and anxiety. Despite the challenges ahead, he was committed to ensuring the safety and happiness of Joyce and Evelyn. He knew the threat of Walter and his accomplices wouldn't be easily dispelled, but he wouldn't let it disrupt the peaceful life they were creating together. Slowly, life began to stabilize for Joyce and Evelyn, thanks to Dennis's unwavering dedication. Beyond providing a secure home, he actively helped Joyce find a job that aligned with her skills, one that would give her both financial independence and a renewed sense of purpose. Leveraging his network, Dennis sought out a work environment where Joyce would feel valued and safe. One evening over dinner in their new home, Dennis asked, "How did today's interview go, Joyce?" Nearby, Evelyn was busy stacking colorful blocks on the living room floor, her laughter filling the room with warmth. Joyce looked at Dennis with gratitude in her eyes, her face lit with hope. "It was wonderful, Dennis. The manager seemed genuinely impressed by my experience, and the atmosphere there is so welcoming. I feel like I could really thrive in that job," she shared, her voice filled with anticipation. Dennis smiled, his eyes reflecting pride. "I knew you'd make a great impression. You have so many valuable skills, Joyce. I'm truly happy for you." With each passing day, Dennis and Joyce found themselves growing closer, not only as partners in caring for Evelyn, but as friends who enjoyed sharing new experiences. Whether they were visiting a local museum, catching a movie together, or simply taking a leisurely walk through the park, these small moments drew them together. One afternoon, as they watched Evelyn gleefully playing in the park, Dennis gently took Joyce's hand. "Joyce, I never imagined that everything could change so profoundly in such a short time. Since you and Evelyn entered my life, it feels as though every corner has brightened, and everything finally feels whole," Dennis confessed, his gaze steady and sincere as he looked into her eyes. Joyce felt the warmth of his words resonate within her, and she responded by gently squeezing his hand, a soft smile lighting up her face. "I feel exactly the same, Dennis. You've brought us a sense of safety and happiness that I never thought possible. I honestly don't know how we would have managed without you," she replied, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. The conversation drifted naturally to their hopes and aspirations, to what they could build together. They talked about future plans and shared dreams, imagining all the possibilities that seemed to unfold before them now that they were together. Yet even in the midst of this budding happiness, Dennis stayed vigilant. His protective instincts remained strong and his awareness sharpened by the knowledge of potential dangers that could still threaten them. His commitment to keeping Joyce and Evelyn safe was unwavering, and he was determined to stand guard, prepared for anything. As they discussed ideas for a small picnic planned for the coming weekend, Dennis's thoughts turned to the matter of security once again. Maybe we should consider taking some personal safety classes, just to be ready for anything, he suggested, always practical and thoughtful. Joyce nodded in agreement, recognizing the wisdom behind his suggestion. That's a good idea. It would definitely make me feel more confident, knowing we're prepared to protect ourselves, she said, appreciating his constant care and concern for their well-being. That evening in the park became one of those meaningful moments, one of the early milestones in this new phase of their lives. Each day that passed seemed to erode the shadows of their past, replacing them with the light of a promising future they were building together, step by step. As time moved forward, days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Dennis, Joyce, and Evelyn settled into a tranquil routine, their lives filled with small but deeply treasured moments. The routine interwove their lives seamlessly, creating a rhythm in which each day brought new reasons to be grateful. Evelyn was growing quickly. Her laughter filled their home, her boundless curiosity inspiring countless small adventures as a family. On a peaceful afternoon, as they sat together in their garden watching Evelyn play, Dennis gently held Joyce's hand. "Can you believe how much has changed?" he asked, his voice filled with warmth and wonder as he gazed at her with a smile. Joyce looked at him, her eyes shining with love and gratitude. "Sometimes it all feels like a beautiful dream, one that I never want to end," she replied, her voice soft but heartfelt as she squeezed his hand in return. "You've changed everything for us, Dennis. I'll always be grateful for that." In a way she hadn't thought possible, the truth was undeniable. What started as a simple, kind gesture on that rainy night had blossomed into a bond that ran deep. Together, they had woven a shared life, one they hadn't seen coming, yet now couldn't imagine any other way. "I'll always be here for you too, no matter what happens. We'll handle whatever comes our way together," Dennis promised, his voice steady with determination. Joyce nodded, feeling renewed strength from his words. With Dennis by her side, she was sure she could face anything. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm, vivid colors across the sky, they noticed someone approaching their gate. It was Paul, their lawyer, walking with a solemn, serious expression that made Dennis stand up at once. "Dennis, Joyce, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something we need to discuss," Paul said, looking intently at them both. "I just received a call from the police. They have news about Walter, and apparently there's something crucial you need to know." Dennis and Joyce exchanged anxious glances, a sense of unease settling over them. "What happened, Paul?" Dennis asked, maintaining a steady tone. "Walter, he confessed everything. But it's more than just the crimes we were already aware of," Paul continued, pausing to make sure he had their full attention. "It turns out he was being controlled, used in a much larger scheme involving some very influential people in the city. And Joyce, it appears your father was involved." Paul's words hit Joyce hard, like a physical blow. "My father? How could he? He never said anything about this." "Yes, it seems he was deeply indebted to some dangerous people. Walter was used to manipulate you, pressuring you into situations that unknowingly served your father's interests," Paul explained, his tone heavy. Joyce's past, which she thought she'd left behind, had returned in a way neither of them had expected, twisting her redemption story into something more tangled and mysterious. Feeling Dennis's supportive squeeze on her hand, Joy steadied herself. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice shaky. "We'll face it together," Dennis replied firmly. "Nothing is going to tear us apart." So, as unexpected truths unraveled, Dennis, Joyce, and Evelyn braced themselves for what lay ahead. Their story wasn't over. It was only deepening, each new chapter filled with challenges, but also with steadfast hope and love. Whatever fate held in store, they were resolved to face it together as a family. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button below to follow along with us. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.